Vice Chancellor, honorary guests, my ladies and gentlemen. I'm very passionate about teaching and absolutely delighted to have been given this opportunity to give you a short lecture on a very important topic. The title of the lecture is No Food Without Rain, but why is there so much talking about the dairy cows? We are now coming towards the end of the traditional harvest season. And this is the time of year when harvests have traditionally been celebrated. This year may be primarily the apple trees that are offering fantastic harvests. For many people today, it's a time to look into locally produced foods and also to share the joy and pride of your own garden's assets. But in the old times, the harvest feast was a time of relief, both that the hard work was done, but also that you knew that there was a good chance to survive the winter, because you'd got sufficient food stored. The Swedish Summer of 2018 offered many holiday memories to be formed. It was in many areas of the country the warmest since recordings began, and also came with very little rain. And when these weather forecasts and weather reports were shared on the TV, it started with its fabulous holiday weather. And it was for weeks and weeks. And then we got, but farmers are complaining. It eventually evolved into farmers are struggling. And then the forests got on fire, and the reports about the farmer perspective was held back a bit. But the lecture is on the struggling farmers, so let's stick with that for a while. I strongly object to this statement. It's not the farmers primarily that were struggling. They should have said, we're getting reports of severe crop failures from farmers, and this will affect everyone. It's not the farmer's problem, it's everyone's problem if we don't have any food. And the situation was actually similar in terms of meteorology to the severe crop failures in 1867 and 1868 that started with a very long winter in 1867, primarily in the north of Sweden, but all throughout Sweden. The snow just never went away. And when it finally did, there was frost again around midsummer that killed a lot of their crops. We had the same, and then in 1868, it was a very hot summer that was primarily challenging to the south of Sweden. We had the same situation this year, and that's why it became such a problem. We had crop failures in 2017 as well, due to a cold spring with a late frost and then a very wet fall that made it impossible to harvest some of the crops because you just couldn't get out into the fields. So the results of the crop failures in 1867 and until 69 were famine with losses of lives. People starved to death. Birth rates went down significantly, and people emigrated to Denmark and Germany, but primarily to North America. And many of them during this period from Småland and Värmland. And so, what about the effects of the summer of 2018? Well, we've been having ice cream and enjoying ourselves and not really been hit by the effects yet. This is because there's a delay in some of the effects on foods, and there's a short-term surplus on other foods like strawberries that finished much too soon. Not a huge problem for the consumers, but a financial problem for the producers. We also now have a global food market where we can buy foods from far away. But that is a short-term solution. Even on a good year, Sweden is importing around half of its foods. So if we then cut the harvests and keep importing, we will very soon not be in a food security situation. The ice cream represents that global food system, which wasn't around in 1867. Now, to get closer to the dairy cows, with all the reports in the media, there's been a lot of attention on the dairy cows, and I'm going to try and explain my view on why that was. Cows have the ability to convert grass to milk and meat, and they convert a lot of grass. I think that's super cool, and how they do it is something I think everyone should know. And now with this opportunity, and you're not going to leave, I'm going to give you a quick run-through. This is a simplified picture of the inside of the left side of a cow. The red circle is indicating the entry of feed into the stomach compartments that precede the equivalent of our stomach. And the digester is then entering the rumen, which is a large fermentation chamber that hosts a lot of microbes. And these microbes can digest carbohydrates in grass that the human body cannot do anything about. Mammals themselves cannot digest these carbohydrates, but cows live in symbiosis with microbiota. And the carbohydrates offer energy for the microbes, and that's why they ferment them. They don't do it for the greater good. And the byproducts from that fermentation can be used by the cow to make glucose and build fat. The carbohydrates in grass are mainly cellulose, but there can also be a lot of sugar, and cows can also eat foods with a lot of starch in them. Regardless of the type of carbohydrate, microbes will ferment them to get energy for themselves. The byproducts that are left when the microbes are done are short carbon skeletons, volatile fatty acids, that the most important ones are acetate, propionate, and butyrate. Acetate and butyrate is used in the body to produce fat. If the cow is lactating, producing milk, she will use them to make milk fat. While propionate can be converted in the liver back into glucose and used to synthesize lactose, which is the carbohydrate of milk. And this is the elegance. Cows can use cellulose in grass to produce sugar and fat in milk. There are also other byproducts from the microbial fermentation. There is a production of carbon dioxide and methane that leaves the cow, and there is also water produced in the end. The carbon dioxide and methane are energy loss for the cow, and has a sustainability aspect in the greater context. The microbes also have the ability to convert nitrogen in the grass into microbial protein, and they also make some changes to any fat that is in the grass. So for an agronomist, animal scientist like myself, we say that we feed the microbes and the microbes feed the cows. Because when those microbes die, the cow will digest the microbes and she will get the microbial protein. So if we look at a cow on pasture, this is a cow out in a field eating grass. She's using the nutrients in the grass and converts them into animal tissues and a new calf. She's also producing milk. And among the tissues at the top, you see meat. And I just wanted to point out that about 70% of the Swedish produced beef originates from animals of a dairy cow breed. And now some of you may think that now she's lost me, so what other options are there? Well, they could come from a beef cow, who is a suckler cow. She produces meat, but doesn't offer any milk to the food production system. So back to the dairy cow. When she is finished with the food, there will also be some feces and urine, which is used to fertilize crops. And there's those gases that I talked about before. She also evaporates heat. By eating all of this grass, she will contribute to an open landscape. There's actually grass growing on around or more than 50% of the Swedish farmland acres. So we grow a lot of grass, and a lot of that is used by dairy cows. If it's grass grown on a farm field, like in the picture, that grass is a significant carbon sink that will bind carbon from the atmosphere. If she instead is on a natural pasture that isn't cultivated and there's no tractors running on it, she will contribute to biodiversity in the landscape on these natural pastures. And that biodiversity is highly relevant for the function of the whole ecosystem. And just to show you the difference, this is a picture of one of Sweden's finest natural pastures. The hilly part closest to you is a natural pasture. And all of this doesn't lend itself well to farming. You can't drive a tractor there, and you will also have problems harvesting anything with your hands, but it's excellent food for ruminants. While in the far away in the picture, you see some farmland grass instead. And around 15% of the areas that are available for farming in Sweden are natural pastures. So they look like this, and they can only be used by grass eaters. Another quality of these areas is that people seem to like them. A lot of Swedish citizens really enjoy these areas. They're pretty, there's a lot of flowers, and a lot of insects, mushrooms. However, in July of 2018, natural pastures in many areas of Sweden looked like this. And this is a picture from an intensively grown pasture in a field. And for those of you who are not yet cow experts, there are the cows. This crop could also have been grown to produce the winter feed for the animals. And July across large parts of Sweden gave less than 20% of the expected grass harvests. Grass needs at least the equivalent of 3 millimeters of rain per day, and in the warm temperatures of the summer of 2018, probably around twice as much. Sweden has a very good yearly precipitation. We get enough rain and snow and hail. It just we didn't get any during the summer, which is the grass cropping season. And the drought hit then during a peak time for dairy farms, which is also a time that will determine the production for the whole following year. And because of the difficulties in 2017, farmers did not have any surplus of grass feeds stored from the previous year. That was already finished because that also was a difficult time. Most of the time the cows are not on pasture, they are fed indoors. And if the grass is not harvested during the summer, there will be nothing to feed them during the winter season. And you can't replace all of the grass with something else because they need grass to have a good welfare and to function as they should. So the hot and sunny weather presented two problems: heat stress for the animals and a shortage of nutrients. Both of these factors make milk yield decrease, and that lowers the income and the availability of cash for the farm business. The heat stress can be solved with taking cows indoor. When we feel that the summer temperatures are nice, they're usually too hot for a dairy cow. But if she's indoors, you need to feed her something. There was no food to offer. The problem of nutrients could probably be solved by offering other pastures, but then you need to also get water to those. All of this means a lot of extra work for the farmers. And if you remember how hot it was in July and August, it was really hard work for farmers to take care of their animals in this weather. So it was a welfare problem both for animals and people. So the less available nutrients could have been solved by using winter feed, but if you start the winter feed use already in July, it won't last for the year. You could maybe buy feed, but there is no real market for purchase of the winter feeds for dairy cows, because each farm usually produces their own, and it's also such large volumes that you can't really ship them around. And also, a lot of neighboring countries have also suffered from the drought, so there's not a lot to buy. So we also had a lower harvest of winter feeds. We then need to look at other possible crops. One was to turn cereal grain crops like wheat and oats and barley into winter feed for the cows. That meant we harvested a lot less straw that can be used for bedding. So again, if we want to get the cows indoor, we need to provide some bedding for them. And that is also limited and expensive. There's also a possibility, if rain comes again, to plant some new grass, which is one of the questions I got this summer from several people. What type of grass should I plant if rain comes back? And in those situations, if you're live on a radio interview, it's good to have an agronomy background to be able to say something about the types of grasses that could be used. Keeping animals is a very big responsibility, and farmers primarily needed to look into the welfare of their animals. Many offered the cows to graze in forests. You then need to know how that is affecting the forest, so you need to know forestry to be able to sort this out. This is a very rich forest pasture. You can also harvest leaves and harvest reeds, or offer the cows to graze in reeds. Now I think you're trained enough to spot the cows. These are in late July and early August, grazing in reeds, and they eat a lot of the reeds. And you can also treat straw with ammonia to make it a bit higher nutrient quality and also a bit more pleasant for the animals to eat. So in the back you see bales of straw, and in the front they have been covered in plastic and treated with ammonia. But again, straw is also a shortage. You can also choose to decrease the production per cow by just stop milking her, for example, then she will need less nutrients. But you then get a lower income and you can't organize your purchases of feeds. You can decrease the herd size, get rid of some cows. And if you get rid of cows in a time when there's no food for cows, you need to slaughter them. And there's been tremendous slaughter queues. Today, if I want to sign more of my cows up for slaughter in many parts of Sweden, the waiting list is 1 year. So it doesn't solve the problem, because 1 year from now, I hope there will be feed again. And it also has long-term effects for the farms, because if you imagine a nice dairy cow who has her first lactation in 2018, she's then going to have her second, third, and fourth lactation. In each of these lactations, there will be a calf born, or just before the lactation, and that calf will also enter the herd if it's a female calf. So this one cow will contribute for the farm for many years to come. If we have to kill her by culling, take her away from the farm, that will have effects for many years to come. So the farms don't pick up quickly if they start decreasing cow numbers. So to make a long story short, the shortage of feeds should never have been there in the first place. And I now want to point to some possibilities for the future. A good news is that grass picks up quickly when rain starts. It has been fantastic to see the grass growing in September. And that's both on pastures and on the fields. So many farms who were very poorly off a month ago now have enough grass for the winter. But there's still many farms who don't. And there's a lot of grass needed for the winter. These are big bales of silage. Each dairy cow will need 20 of these for the winter period. So if you then have 100 cows on your farm, it's easy for you to understand the logistical challenges in buying all the feed you need. So Some points about food security and animal welfare during extreme weather. It can be drought, it can also be flooding. Things we need to do from an animal scientist's perspective. We need to store feed for animals and food for people, which had just been abandoned in the mid-1800s. There was, prior to that, a law in Sweden that there should be local food stores, and the government had said, we don't need this anymore, we can send that food to the armed forces instead, and then the horrible years came. We need collaboration in the acute crisis phase. In the first phase, when the farmers are struggling a lot, everyone needs to join forces. And unfortunately, this happened during the summer holiday season, so a lot of policymakers, decision makers, experts, and everyone else but the farmers had holiday. We need national funds to support farms through extreme weather and reasonable regulation for the normal times. Only active farms will contribute to a sustainable food production system. Every farm lost now is a lost possibility for the future. We need to maintain drainage on farmland in terms of flooding, and we need to store water in the landscape to be able to irrigate crops when there's no water coming. Profitable farms are more resilient to fluctuations in income. Farmers need to be able to make money. And this means that we need to pay more for the food in the shops. Everyone needs to do that. We need a variation in crops that are tolerant to different challenges. And we need to keep the grass eaters in the food production system because grass picks up quickly. And we then need the grass eaters to use that asset. We need to keep developing and evaluating new feed sources and alternative crops and byproducts. And there needs to be many of us doing this together. It's not only science or only politicians or only farmers. Everyone needs to do this together. We need to be good at what we can in our expertise, but we also need to be really good at working together. And for this university's point of view, we need people here who know the everyday life for the farmers to be able to know when and how we can step in. There were many reasons for the focus on cows. The drought hit in a peak season for dairy farming, and dairy farming was already on the agenda because of the payment systems for milk. Links between methane emissions from cows and the unusual weather provided interesting material for debates. And there were also people who are against animal farming who took the opportunity during the summer to say they should quit farming anyway. Cows on pasture are a strong symbol for Swedish summer. And I also think cows make it to the news because people like cows. Thank you.